Hello, and welcome to Dispel Magic, the podcast where we overthink how the magic of D&D might shape your campaign in surprising and unexpected ways. I'm Benjamin, game designer and writer, online at Sterling Vermin on Twitter, or sterlingvermin.com on the internet at large.
And my name's Dane. I'm a Dungeon Master podcaster and voice actor, and you can find me all those same places that you can find Benjamin, but also not a website, at Dane in Danger.
Eloquently put.
Thank you, as always.
Yeah, we are winding up season 2.
Let's tie it up.
Yeah.
With a bow.
Put a little bow on top.
Lock it up. Arcane lock it up.
Like in our mid-season review, we're going to go through episode by episode, talk a little bit about the things we've been thinking about since then, any comments we've received from fans, and then also give our taglines for those episodes. We'll start with Arcane Lock. Dane, what do you have to say about Arcane Lock?
However ridiculous my chest town was, locked up city.
Right.
I think it has a place, at least in a Feywild adventure. I think that probably makes more sense there than in the real world, quote unquote. The real world, right? But I'm not letting that go. I stand by it.
Honestly, the idea grew on me a little bit as I thought about it more.
It's so whimsical.
It is very whimsical. I think I like it.
Thank you.
Ended up coming around to like
Thank
it.
you.
Yeah.
What'd you find out about it?
I didn't find out anything.
What have you uncovered?
What thoughts have I been thinking?
Yeah.
Well, the first is that I just recently went back and looked at the spell again. I can't remember why, maybe just in preparation for this. And I was again struck by, I don't understand this spell.
It's just unclear.
I don't understand what the intent is. And it's funny because, I don't know if I mentioned this in the episode itself, but when I went to online forums and tried to start a conversation about this with people, I felt like they were outright hostile to me for not understanding it. But I also didn't get the sense that anybody else understood it either. They just didn't want to have they just didn't like the idea of having a conversation about it.
They didn't want to accept the fact that this might not be the most well-written spell.
Yeah, it was very, I don't know. But we did get a comment about this on Twitter from Band of Jenkins. And I apologize, I didn't check pronouns beforehand, so I'm just going to say they. So they said that the spell would be useful for assassinations. And the couple of examples they provided were either these are both awful, so I apologize. But
the assassination's awful? Right. Is that what you're trying to say?
So putting somebody in a room where there's only one door, arcane locking it, and then setting the building on fire. Mm-hmm. Or same deal, but on a boat, and you sink the boat.
Sink the boat.
Yeah.
It's very Sims to just put them in a pool, take away the ladder, and they swim themselves to death.
Right.
But in this situation, you're putting them in a room and you're taking away the door.
And burning them to death.
And then burning them to death. Clean, simple assassination.
Right.
Put them in a room, arcane lock the room, burn the house down.
You know, the thing is actually that before you just said that, I was thinking that's kind of an inconvenient way to kill someone. But actually, it would be inobvious that they'd been murdered.
Oh, 100, if you want to cover that
because
up.
The door will be destroyed in the fire. Mm-hmm. It won't be arcane. There's nothing there to show that it was ever locked in any way.
The perfect arcane crime.
Yeah, it kind of is.
And who knows if their skull will be intact for Speak with Dead.
Yeah, I mean, probably not.
Probably
At that end,
not.
I mean, you're on the other side of the door, so if you can get them to go in the door without, then you're kind of free and clear on that respect. So good job, Band of Jenkins. That is a very good tool for assassins.
Mm-hmm. It also kind of reminds me of when we used demiplane to kill people. Just put them in, put them in a room,
shove them in demiplane, and just let them.
A burning demiplane.
Yeah, there's lots of demiplanes you could put them in.
Countless.
Wood, stone.
That's it.
That's the two. Those are the two kinds of demiplanes.
Love that spell.
Dane, do you have a tagline for this spell?
I do. I came up with security with a side of magic.
Good. That's good.
Yeah. And then ding,
Sure.
Ding, smile. Ding.
There's a padlock on the emblem?
advertisement
on the advertisement of the emblem, and it shines. Yeah. Right there
Click.
at the end.
Ding.
Yeah.
It's fun. How about you? What's your tagline?
Not just locked, arcane locked.
I was thinking of something around the lines of like Lock Plus, because it's Lock, but just that much better.
That's like the streaming service
Right.
where you can get arcane lock on anything you want.
Just whatever it is.
Streaming.
Next, we got Fabricate. Fabricate was kind of an epiphany moment for you, right?
Yeah. Was about halfway through. Fabricate was actually a spell I ran at twice for episode notes. Dane and I were going to record it.
We did. We recorded half of an episode and gave up because it was tough.
Yeah, I just didn't have the angle yet. Like, I knew you could create a bunch of stuff with it, and I knew that was kind of disruptive, but I couldn't put my finger on exactly why or how. And
we knew something was there. We just couldn't quite reach it. And in recording the episode, you could hear us reaching.
Yeah.
So we were just like, let's come back to this later.
But we had a good conversation afterwards. And then, so when I was writing the notes for the second time, bearing in mind what we had talked about, I thought, I wonder how many people were crafters at this time. Like, how many jobs did this place? I think I said this in the episode, which then got me to look back at plant growth, because I realized there were probably many more people in agriculture. And yeah, so this episode was a big revelation for me, because when I had first come to you, Dane, with the idea of Dispel Magic, I really thought when we had like 2 dozen spells all kind of interlocking, that's when we would see a world come into focus that looked very different from the traditional D&D campaign settings that we have. But it's really just plant growth and fabricate, and all of a sudden none of the D&D campaign settings that we have make any sense at all.
Just logically walking through each of these spells has changed the world in its own fun, kind of specific way. And I'm sure you can take it any number of different ways, but this particular spell combination seems to really permanently go in one direction.
Yeah, I mean, there's like 2 industries
done
that are like the primary industries of the time that are just solved, kind of.
Yeah, except for mining, which
that's true. Yeah.
I did cut out my mining rant of that episode. I went on a little rant about how superfluous mining seems, but
somebody's gonna have to write a mining spell.
Someone. I'm looking at you, spell writer guy.
I was thinking about me, so
yeah. Okay, good.
We're both thinking about the same person.
We're on the same page. What's your tagline for this one?
My tagline for this one is tomorrow's infrastructure today. What's yours?
Mine is seize the means of production.
Yeah.
Because it really does make capitalism moot.
Well, not really, because capitalists are all about exploiting. Like, they're just going to exploit this mage that casts Fabricate.
I think to an extent. But once the supply outweighs the demand and money becomes superfluous, then capitalism's dead.
True.
Because there's enough resources for everyone.
I do think that almost with plant growth and Fabricate, you hit a point where it's almost like a fantasy Star Trek.
That's what I'm saying, yeah.
Because it's just...
If you don't...
You want hot coffee? Fine, here's Fabricate. You got hot coffee.
I'm going to fabricate you...
Hot coffee.
Coffee. Hot. Fabricate. That's the Fabricate sound. Yeah. That one turned out good.
Then we talked about this season we did something a little different.
Left turn.
We talked about a class. We talked about the wizard class.
Pretty classy of us.
Which felt like a kind of natural place to go from the spell Fabricate, since we're kind of talking about this movement towards the ubiquity of magic in a setting. I don't have a lot to add to what we talked about in the wizard episode, but we did get a question about what wizard school we thought would have the most influence on everyday life. So I cracked open my PHB, my Xanathars, and my Tashas, and I did a little looking.
A little digging, huh?
I think, the notable ones, I thought, Abjuration, Evocation, Necromancy, and Blade Singer from Tasha's all would have prominent roles in a military. But that's not really every day.
Yeah.
So, like, for various reasons, I think those 4 would fill out any kind of military fantasy military that you're going to have operate. But in terms of the two most common schools, or in terms of the wizard subclasses that are going to have the biggest impact on day-to-day life, that would be conjuration and transmutation. So the School of Conjuration, as its second level feature, you can summon any item that's less than 3 cubic feet and weighs 10 pounds or less. The object is magically visible, which could be a good thing, could be a bad thing. If people don't know
what's magic and what isn't
about this ability, then they might think that guy's got a magic thing and he's trying to sell it to me only at the price of a regular item. Like that, what a steal. I'll get that. But then it disappears in an hour, so...
See, I would think that enchantment magic would have a bigger effect. Anything affecting people's minds.
Well, I'm not talking about magic. I'm talking about the wizard school specifically. So the subclass and whether or not that subclass has any features.
I see what you mean. Okay.
Yeah. And the enchantment one, I think, is just something like you kind of mesmerize one person, which is good, fine. But like, people sleep at night.
Yeah,
and,
that makes sense.
You know, so it's like the people are already kind of
so not the school of magic, but the actual
the subclass for And then transmutation is similar, where you can use their second level feature to turn one material into another for an hour. It's weirdly actually more restrictive than the conjuration one, which is weird given what it is, but between these two things, it made me between the conjuration feature and the transmutation feature, it made me think a lot of our Charm Person episode, where we talked about how large financial transactions would probably typically involve a mediator who waits an hour to ensure that if anyone's under the effect of Charm Person when they came to the agreement, they're no longer under that before the deal is finalized.
Restructures how business is taken care of.
And so in a similar way, I think this would apply to that as well, because you want to make sure that this, like,
your gold is gold.
This block of silver this guy brought in is not just a transmuted wooden block. Yeah. It's actually a block of silver.
Money Watcher, worst, most boring job ever.
I'm sure there are worse.
We could come up with some pretty bad jobs.
Yeah, I mean, I think when we talked about Animate Dead, there was like somebody's job was just to like motivate zombies to do things.
Yeah, that's right.
So
just hanging there,
yeah,
reading books. That might be a fun episode, a Dirty Jobs episode, where we just come up with all the worst things.
I think it would be hard to top zombie bait.
Zombie bait's pretty bad, boring and dangerous.
Yeah,
like a weird combination of boring and dangerous.
Yeah,
I think we could have fun with it. If you, the listener, have any fun, dirty jobs, tweet us at Dispel Magic Pod on Twitter, while Twitter's still around.
Yeah, for the moment.
For the moment.
People in the future might not even know what we're talking about when we say Twitter.
Twitter? You mean Mastodon?
Yeah, we'll see about that. Do you have a tagline for this episode?
I do. Worth your weight in ink and paper. It seems like most of the things we talked about hinged on having ink and paper, learning new spells, sharing information, really high quality ink and paper, the lifeblood of a wizarding society. Pretty silly. What was your tagline?
Student loans coming to a fantasy setting near you. 'Cause,
debt.
Yeah,
it's ubiquitous.
It's just so nice to have student loans in real life that why wouldn't you want to?
Let's bring it in. Let's bring it into our fantasy realm.
Do some role play with it.
It's just instead of a shopping episode, it's an application episode.
For debt relief.
What's fantasy FAFSA like?
Oh, God.
Oh, God.
Hello, friends. Dane here, saying thank you for listening and sharing our show. Telling other people about Dispel Magic is the best way for us to grow, along with you rating and reviewing our show on whatever podcast app you use. We've also revamped our Patreon. Benjamin is writing monthly spells. There's a behind-the-screen show where we talk about our home games, along with other little extras we'll be sprinkling in here or there. So, if you like the show, please tell a friend, rate and review, and check out our Patreon. Thanks again for listening, and happy spelling.
Call Lightning is the next episode. This, to me, was if Fabricate felt like the final nail in the coffin, Call Lightning was the actual final nail in the coffin. It was like, yeah, how do you walk this back?
It was the shovelfuls of dirt on top of the coffin.
Yeah, right, there you go.
To bury it.
Right. Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. That's a better metaphor.
Thank you.
Yeah. The only thing that I had that I wrote a note about this, but I don't think it came up in the episode, is that the sorcerer class does get a meta magic feat in Tasha's that lets them turn lightning damage into acid, cold, fire, poison, or thunder. And there's lots of other kinds of infrastructure that you might be able to build with those things or do with those things. I mean, poison is something where, like, if you can just create bolts of poison, I'm guessing you could wreck a water supply really easily. Bolts of cold, bolts of cold for 10 minutes. You can, if you've got like some kind of conductive metal or even stone, you can probably create a refrigeration system.
We haven't delved into refrigeration, and I was on a podcast called A Couple of Characters where we talked about Ice Knife.
Yeah.
And we talked about
I'm giving you an inch right now. Okay? It's a short leash.
What are you talking about?
Don't start pulling.
We were talking about the excellent and very useful spell Ice Knife on that episode.
Right.
And just how much refrigeration in any form would change a world.
Yeah.
And you could do that with the perfect and very desirable spell Ice Knife. But in this case, Bolt of Cold, you could do it even better.
Yeah, I mean, call cold bolts. I mean, yeah, for 10 minutes, you're just nailing whatever container with cold over and over and over again. It's going to
get cold.
It's going to get cold.
It's going to get cold in there.
It's going to be a cold boy. I do think we should find a spell in the future to really dig in on refrigeration, because so many spells that deal cold damage, and I do think that's the kind of natural
that's where you go with it.
Application to that is
revolutionize the world. Just for clarification, can they only change lightning damage to another kind of damage, or is it you can change any type of damage to any other kind of damage?
It's not any damage to any damage. It's basically like the kind of elemental damage type. So it's you can switch freely. Well, not freely. I think it costs like a sorcery point or something. But between acid, cold, fire, lightning, poison, or thunder. But since in this case we're talking about a lightning spell, I just mentioned the
sure.
Spell,
well, it makes me think like what other spells could become much more useful by changing its type.
I don't think anything would be. I'm happy to look. It's hard to imagine it getting that ability getting more value than Call Lightning, because it's such a sustained, long time. There are very few damage spells that last this long, and the funny thing is that that storm thing still applies.
Mm-hmm. Like controlling a storm.
Yeah, it's still a storm, but now all of a sudden it's like cold instead of lightning, or poison instead of or acid.
Literal acid rain.
Yeah.
Remember in the 90s when acid rain was going to be like such a problem?
Yeah, I do remember that. I remember thinking that that would be a problem I would deal with in my lifetime, and so far
here we are. Here we are not dealing with it.
Yeah, just rising oceans.
So I'm thinking about Ice Knife, Fire Knife, Poison Knife.
I gave you seriously, Dane?
Thunder Knife.
Rein it in. I was very clear with you about my expectations around this Ice Knife thing. Give me your tagline for the spell and let's move on.
You got it. Steampunk, whether you want it or not.
Very good. Very good.
I got a bit of a line reading from Benjamin on that one.
Inspired by weather. Inspired by your creative spelling of the word weather.
I can't spell. Everyone knows this. I did spell weather the way I said it just now. But I mean, if you start using electricity, you're going to get steampunk. Like that's just what's going to happen. You can't get around it. Iron on people's faces, rivets everywhere. Yeah. That's what happens in steampunk worlds. People get like plates of metal fastened to their bodies. It's a common trope.
Oh, okay.
Airships? Lousy
well,
with
yeah,
airships.
airships, for
My
sure.
God in heaven. Hey, Benjamin, what's yours?
Call lightning, sparking the Industrial Revolution. How about
That
that?
covers a lot of areas. I like that because it covers a lot. It's got a pun in it, which
Sure.
mine did too, ultimately, I guess. But it's also indicative of what we talked about, that
Yeah.
industry. Do, 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 do.
I can hear the 80s synth music that you're singing
Thank
when
you.
that happens. Yeah.
Now, Deck of Many Things, I think, was a pretty requested. Like, I think when people think D&D, they think Beholders, they think Dragons, they think Deck of Many Things.
I'd say that's probably pretty fair. It's iconic.
It's iconic. And we found out that it kind of ruins games.
I wouldn't say we found that out. I think everybody who's ever used it in a game has found out that it ruins the games.
Fair enough.
It's a bad magic item. It's a bad boy.
It's silliness. It's just trying to shake things up. But, coming up with different organizations to rein it in.
I mean, that I think is probably your best way of including the Deck of Many Things while not ruining the campaign you've spent painstaking months and years building, is to introduce it as one of these factions of either people who are trying to protect the Deck of anybody from accessing the Deck of Many Things, or people who are trying to kind of unwittingly play pawns into drawing from it for their own kind of sick amusement.
I think that it frames an interesting campaign arc.
Yeah.
So if it's this floating casino that we talked about, sowing chaos wherever it goes,
Yeah.
and your party is trying to stop that from happening because maybe they're just giving out so many decks of many things, and narrating all of the strings that are attached to that, where people maybe don't even know they're getting these wishes, right? And suddenly their house is made of gold and there's a gold house. Just really mundane things like that, but could be a fun story arc.
Yeah, I mean, I do think the other thing is that kind of concept moves the Deck of Many Things out of MacGuffin territory and into something like more interesting than just chasing it. You're trying to interact with people who want to use it for good or for ill.
And world changing, because in most settings it exists.
Yeah.
Right? But you don't see the effects of it
right
throughout your gameplay until you get it, and it ruins your whole
game.
Biz.
Yeah.
So
one of the things we talked about is why would somebody make the Deck of Many Things, or who's creating them? And an idea that I had since then, because I wasn't fully satisfied. I thought we'd come up with some good answers to that question, but I wasn't fully satisfied.
Okay.
Made me think, in D&D cosmology, aberrations, the creature type, are from kind of like outside the multiverse. I don't know how clearly it's spelled out, but I always envision them as things that like don't exist or shouldn't exist, but are somehow invading.
They're pushing their way into reality
plane anyway. Yeah. But things that are not real, that are pushing themselves into real space. And I thought, what if there were like frequent incursions like that were just super disruptive and damaging? Maybe they're tearing apart the fabric of the world. And the way the gods fix that is by making a Deck of Many Things shaped hole that unreality had to travel through to get to the material planes. And so it was still damaging and like chaotic, and no one wanted it to show up, but it was better than the thing that was happening.
They made a gatekeeper.
Yes. The way things that aren't real are allowed to pass into our reality is if they travel through this Deck of Many Things channel that converts it into a Deck of Many Things.
Can't get rid of it, but we can push it to go in a place that's a little more mitigating.
Yeah.
Its effects. That makes sense. What was your tagline?
My tagline for this one is, when your campaign absolutely, positively has to be destroyed overnight.
And you did that in the style of FedEx.
Yes.
Yeah. That makes sense. I did two for this one.
Let's hear 'em.
The first one is, guess we're just doing this now. Like, all other pretenses are dropped.
Yep.
Whatever you just pulled has to be dealt with then and there. Done.
For good or for bad.
For good.
For good or for ill.
For good or for badness. And then the last one is the worst card trick. Pick a card, any card.
But don't really, because it's bad.
Are these cards made out of ivory? So
this is
weird.
Tusk.
This is Tusk. So that kind of does it for what we went over this last season. But Benjamin, what about next season?
What's on the horizon?
Yeah.
We have we're planning to return for season 3. That's the big announcement.
That's the big announcement. We're doing another one.
Yeah. We're going to do another season.
We're having fun. We're having a lot of fun doing this.
We will probably, you can probably plan to hear from us again in the early part of 2023. I'd like for that to be January, but we have big plans for next season. And so we'll see. If it's later than that, it's because we're cooking up something extra hot for you.
Ooh, spicy.
Specifically, we are hoping to bring some new voices onto the show.
What could that mean?
Huh? Dun, 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 dun.
Tim Allen's going to be on the show.
No, absolutely not.
Definitely. Wilson, the guy who played Wilson, is going to be on the show.
Tom Hanks.
Tom Hanks. You know, because if you don't want Buzz Lightyear, you're going to get Woody.
Yeah. And Tom Hanks is a decent person, so that's fine, as far as I know.
That's fine. That's fine.
We also, look in the next few months, keep an eye on our Twitter or wherever we migrate if Twitter dies. The plan is for next season for us to have a full schedule in advance so people can really get hype about the spells that they're looking forward to hearing about.
Well, I really like that we've kind of found this heightening through a season, right? One episode is starting to build on the next one. And so I'm excited to see how that happens for this next season.
Or if it does.
I'm sure. I mean, we're creative blokes. I think we'll get something together.
We'll see what we can do.
More spells, more creatures, more magic items, more classes.
More classes. Definitely more classes.
Mm-hmm.
I'm itching to talk about sorcerers for sure.
Rockstar druids.
Every time you say that, it pushes it back a season. Every time you say that
phrase.
One
full season.
Yeah. One full season.
Long-running show.
So, I don't know if it'll be sorcerers next season, but I am very interested in talking about sorcerers.
Cool.
If you are on the Patreon, or if you're interested in the Patreon, I encourage you to pledge. We are going to continue to offer those rewards even during this break between seasons. We do monthly behind the screen episodes, which is just where Dane and I talk about our home games. And one of my home games is Dispel Magic based. So it's kind of implementing the stuff we've been talking about in that show. And then I also do kind of monthly spells. In the future, some that might also include player options or creatures or magic items too.
You're prolific, so you really... You're a creative powerhouse.
Dynamo.
That's
right.
Be a good spell. Dynamo.
What would it do?
That's on you, man. That's on
2,
you.
1. Nope.
Pushes down walls.
Okay, cool. A spell called Dynamo that pushes down walls.
Well, thanks for listening to our season wrap-up. If you have any other ideas for this season or from last season, you can tweet us at Dispel Magic Pod on Twitter.
Or hey, next season too.
Hey, why not?
Or if you just want to say anything at all.
Let us know what you think.
We just want to hear from you.
Leave a like and a comment and a review on Apple iTunes.
Scream our name into the void. We'll hear you.
Ooh, more commercials too. We're going to do more commercials.
We'll see.
I'm excited for that.
If you don't say Ice Knife or Rockstar Druid, we might.
Choices.
Thanks so much for listening. We'll see you again after your next long rest.
Long rest. We hope you've enjoyed this episode of Dispel Magic. If this has inspired any ideas for your game, or you have another take on today's topic, please let us know on Twitter at Dispel Magic Pod. You can find Benjamin at Sterling Vermin and Dane at Dane in Danger. Thank you to Slim Mittens for our cover art, produced by Benjamin Huffman, produced and edited by Dane Fox-McGraw.